Hey guys, what is up? Lord Nick here, bringing you a Flesh and Blood related video. I almost always keep trying to say another League of Legends, but this time it's not League of Legends related. I know that that's kind of weird. That's not what my channel's kind of known for, but I'm getting into Flesh and Blood very, very heavily. I've spent a lot of money in the past week diving into this game. I've bought three different boxes. One Monarch, one Arcane Rising, one Welcome to Wrath. I bought somewhere in the neighborhood of like 20 packs additionally to those boxes. I bought, I think, 15 singles from a shop. Um, and yeah, and two blitz decks. So like I've gone deep dive this last week into it because I got money from my college that I shouldn't have spent on this. But anyhow, um, if you are interested in Flesh and Blood like I've been, and you're looking for somebody to watch, I'm not going to recommend myself. I'm still really new to the game. I think my content's going to be cool, but I don't think I'm going to be that great for somebody who's just starting off. I'm looking into more of like the deck building stuff, which is what's really enticing me into the game. If you really like deck building and being creative and thinking about new ways and strategies to redesign a deck and be that creative aspect, I think this game is going to be great for you. But if you're really looking into what the game is about and looking for tutorials and great videos about them, I recommend Arsenal Pass, Red Zone Rogue, and Tolarian Community College. Those that play Magic might know Tolarian Community College, but the professor does have 4 videos that are specifically um, about Flesh and Blood, and one of them is a tutorial video along with some deck ideas and some reviews of cards and stuff to know certain things that you might want to buy out of the most recent set that has released, which is Monarch. But Tales of Aria is the next set, and it will be coming out in about 2 weeks. So that being said, guys, let's dive into the actual meat and potatoes of this video. And this video, guys, if you have not already kind of tried to piece together what this might be about, it is going to be about Levia. Now, this is not going to be a full deck tech video, but we're going to be talking about common cards used in Levia, common aspects that Levia kind of sucks at, so certain cards that you might need for the deck, on top of the fact that there are going to be some solid replacement ideas to save you some money on the deck, because the deck itself is very expensive, but doesn't have a lot of good results in terms of tournaments behind it, in terms of classic constructed. We're not talking about Blitz, so sorry for those who'd like to play Blitz and want to say that Levia is a great Blitz deck. I know looks like she'd be a really good Blitz deck. I haven't tried it yet, so I can't really speak about it. Anyhow, let's start off by talking about Levia herself, and then comparing her to Rhinar, the next most, the next big, brute guy that you have. Your another option if you want to go brute is Rhinar. So Levia is a shadow brute. She has the ability, like all the brutes, to look at something that is 6 attack or more and do something cool because of it. Her specific thing says if you have 6 attack or more has been put into your banished zone, so not discarded like Rhinar, but into your banished zone. Cards you own with Blood Debt during the end phase do not activate. So Blood Debt says at the beginning of your end phase, if this card is in your banished zone, you lose 1 life. So for each card with Blood Debt in your zone, it could get really nasty. Well, Levia turns that stuff off because you're banishing cards with 6 more. So opposed to discarding like Rhinar, who again gives you Intimidate, which allows you to then banish a card from your opponent's hand at random, face down, they get it back at the end of turn, but that means they don't get it to help protect against you. So there's a big difference between these two powers. Levia is protecting you from yourself. Rhinar is protecting you from your opponent and allowing you to just go face at your opponent. So right off the bat, you can tell Rhinar is more aggressive. Yes, Levia can be aggressive. Yes, the lists that people keep saying are the most competitive lists with Levia use Mandibles Claws and are all about going ham and going really, really hard to the face really freaking early. But at that point, why are you playing Levia? Like, the whole point of Levia is to build around her specifically. And what she does specifically wants you to play a lot of cards that get banished, a lot of things that either play from the banished zone that are okay getting banished, to prevent your Blood Debt, to then allow you to run these Blood Debt cards that are more inherently stronger than a couple other cards out there and do some more things potentially, or cost less. So like Rhinar's cards, might cost less and are like a 7 attack card, but it's a 7 attack that makes you have to discard, and it doesn't always have Intimidate on it. So you run other cards that Intimidate and make you discard as well. So with Rhinar, you have the risk that you're getting rid of some of the cards at random from your hand. Meanwhile, Levia, you're getting the risk that you're getting rid of cards at random from your graveyard. So stuff that you've already filtered out of your hand, be it for defensive value. So where Reinar shines is the fact that he could just go ham constantly. Where Levia shines is that you can play cards that are defensive oriented to get into your yard that might have attack values on them. So like Rally the Rearguard isn't a bad example of this. Now note, a lot of people might say Rally the Rearguard's a bad card for Levia. I think personally it's still pretty good because you also have the option as a defense reaction to use its ability to then pitch another card to your yard so that you can fill up 2 cards into your yard with her. Now, the problem is Levia doesn't have a whole lot of draw aspect to get cards back, so you do have to be aware of that. But where she does make it up is the fact that she uses scab skin leathers, much like Reinar. So you use Gambler's Glove scab skins to make sure that you can try to get as many action points out of your scab skins to then not have to pitch cards so that your lower card hand can then go off. Scab skins are one of the better things for it, but you can use the Hooves of the Shadow Beast is also a really good card as well. It requires you to banish a 6 attack or more card, and then gives you an action point for doing so. But then you break them for it, opposed to scab skins, which is constantly refreshing. But scab skin costs a lot of money. Hooves is pretty much 2 cents, like like 10 cents at most probably. You can probably pick up hooves all the time, or if you get a blitz deck, it comes with them, which is really nice. So when looking at all these things that you can do for this deck, comparing the two is often the thing that people do. Where's the benefit of playing Levia the same way that you play Reinar? Well, there isn't really. If you want to be more aggressive, Reinar is the superior hero for that. His intimidation aspect allows him to just inherently take over the early game so much better than Levia. That being said, Levia gets to then play defensive cards and stuff that heals her to then hit your opponent once they've used all their stuff to attack you, and your opponent's down to just a few cards left. What do they have left to defend against you? Well, pretty much nothing. So if that's the case, then you, as the Levia at that point, start taking over in the mid game. So Reinar is early game aggression, try to finish you in the mid game. Levia is defend, set up a good hand to then kill you to start attacking you in the mid game and hopefully finish you in the late game. So while Levia is not even a traditional control deck, even to a degree, she doesn't sit there and just annihilate your hand and stuff throughout the time. She's literally spending time of herself, but she has to manage her own resources, be it what cards are going into her graveyard, what's getting banished, trying to figure out ways to combo off to then be like, look, I'm using Dominate to then attack you for like 12 attack this turn. Can you survive it? Can you withstand 12 attack this turn and still be able to bounce back next turn? Cool, I'm going to keep defending against you and not take damage here. So I think that they're specifically on 2 different ends of the spectrum, and Levia is going to be better in this control list. Now, a lot of people have always been trying to figure out the more aggressive aspect of her because she does still have that brute quality, but I think people are forgetting the fact that she is also a shadow quality. On top of that, she doesn't combo like chain combos, and if you look at Monarch, it looks to me like she was designed to be a control hero specifically. Because when you look at the light side, we've already kind of solved the light side of Monarch. You look at Bolton, he's an aggressive, attack you repeatedly type of hero. You look at Prism, she sits back and controls more. You look at Chain, he's an aggressive, attack you constantly hero. So what does that mean? Well, if the shoe fits, Levia should be more or less a control deck. And guess what? She fits more to that control style. You play more value cards that you don't care getting banished, that can either be replayed, that allow you to then defend more from your banished zone, or to just inherently be, more defensive and be able to turn off the blood debt so she doesn't hurt herself, but then can turn around and punch you in the face for a ton of damage. So she plays differently than Reinar. That's the big point I'm trying to get across here. So you should stop looking to build her like the other 2 brutes that we had. Build her uniquely to her. A lot of people do build a lot of shadow cards around her, but they still then play her closer to Reinar. They still imagine that you need to be more aggressive like you do with Reinar. And over the past week that I've been really deep diving into this, I've been giving this a ton of thought. I've been buying a lot of cards. I've been looking at a lot of different stuff. And to me, there's a lot of cards that stand out. But let's start off by talking about one of the big weaknesses Levia has. This is basically her only draw card. This is the shadow card that gives you draw, which isn't great, right? So then you're going to be looking at brute cards. What brute cards give me draw? And well, a lot of those brute cards draw you a card and then discard a card. And there's a few of them that draw you more, and we're going to be running those cards for sure. Let me tell you, those are cards that you definitely want to run, like Blood Rush Bellow, for instance, the card that is sitting right behind me, is a card that you definitely want to run because the chances of you being able to turn it on and then draw 2 cards, pretty common. So that's the card that generally, outside of Tome of Torment, that's your other draw card. But then Tome of Torment's your only real draw card here, right? Not quite right. But let's talk about Tome of Torment real quick, as some people might not realize the inherent value in this card. So yes, it is a 0-cost card, but you can play it from your Banish Zone, which is really nice. It draws you a card. So it cycles a card to your graveyard, draws you a card. You can play from your Banish Zone, which puts back in your graveyard. And FYI, putting cards in your graveyard, you need 3 is the magic number. You almost always need 3. Sometimes you need 6. And you need 6 if you're trying to combo certain cards together. You need 3 just to get 1 card off. So being able to put this card repeatedly back into your graveyard and net you a card in the process is really, really good. So this card's inherent value is the fact that it cycles, and so you want 3 of these in your deck. In pretty much every Levia list, I recommend 3 of these cards. This card is so good. Yes, it does nothing, except it puts a card in your yard, which then means you can save some of your later combos for better situations where you can then all in on your opponent. This allows you to get some early trickle damage in on them as well, so you can be a little bit more aggressive potentially. So with that out of the way, this is the only draw shadow card that you have option to that's playable. Now, there might be another one that I'm missing here. I don't know every card in Monarch, but this is the shadow card that you want to run that draws you stuff. So if we're talking about that, then, well, what's one of the other cards that draws you something? Well, we're going to talk about that in potential replacements, because the 2 cards you're going to see very commonly in a lot of Levia lists are going to be Command and Conquer and Art of War. And when you read these cards, it makes a lot of sense as to why these cards are constantly in those lists. Now, the problem I have with these, and a lot of people might have with these are very expensive cards. Command and Conquer are going about $100 if you're lucky, roughly about $90 to $100 each. And you need 3 of them. Art of War is going about $50 to $60 each, and you need 3 of them. So when you're looking at that, that's $300 plus another $150 if you're lucky, and you're looking at about $450 for 6 cards in your deck. And that's a lot of money to be investing into a deck that you don't know is going to do well. And so this can turn a lot of people off. If you don't already have these cards, what's going to be a great way of making this deck function? Because both of these are functionally really good in the deck. Now, Command & Conquer has seen a lot of reviews recently where they're cutting it down to 2 cards. Some people play 1 card. Some people don't play it at all. And some of them are for budgetary reasons. Some of them are saying that this card just isn't nearly as good as you'd hope it would be in a deck that really functions around 6 attack cards. Now, Command & Conquer says defense reaction can't be played in its chain link. That's super impactful. That means your opponent can't defend react into this. They have to pitch cards to defend into it. If it hits the hero, though, then destroy all their arsenal. So in the mid-game, this card is where it turns on, because that's about where people start putting cards into their arsenal, and this card can come online in that point. Now, that being said, it has that one job and that one job only. So if you don't attack with this card, what are your other options with it? Well, defense for 3. That's pretty useful. It's not great, but it's pretty useful nonetheless. And it pitches for 1, which is not good at all. So you are attacking with this card. It locks you into have to attack with this card. And if that's the case, what does it add to your win con? Well, nothing. It's just kind of an unblockable damage that can potentially disrupt your opponent. Which is by no means bad. That is an amazing card. But in the terms of Levia herself, you have to manage your resources. So if it's not helping you manage your resources, it's not helping you progress the overall theme of your deck, outside of the fact that it's a 6 attack that is very, very good, well, then you're spending $100 on a card that is very one-dimensionally good, and universally is good, by the way. I mean, there's no denying this card is not a strong card. It's just not necessarily that strong in Levia. So what's a good replacement card for it? Well, Consuming Aftermath is like $1 at most. And most of the time, you're going to find it under 50 cents. And it says it costs 3, so it costs 1 more. It does the same amount of damage. Not already off to a bad start in most people's eyes. It pitches for the same, so that's even. It does defend for 1 less, which again then puts it in worse condition in most people's eyes. But the big but about this card is it does something very similar. It has Dominate, which means they can only play 1 card from their hand. Which Command & Conquer says no defense reactions, But in the early game, it doesn't, even if it blows up your opponent's arsenal, there's nothing in their arsenal. Now, meanwhile, Consuming Aftermath says in the early game they can only play one card from their hand, which could be way more impactful than Command and Conquer. Because Command and Conquer, while it kills all the defense reactions, they can play as many cards as they want that has defense value to block this from their hand. Or their arsenal in the mid game. Meanwhile, Consuming Aftermath says you get one from hand, one from arsenal, and then you have to use equipment, guys. That is huge. Well, now you might be saying, well, but there's a condition to meet it to get it there. You have to banish a shadow card. How often are you going to banish a shadow card? Well, guess what? Most of your brute actions in this deck, outside of the few neutral brute actions that we talk about, are shadow brute actions. Guess what a shadow brute action counts as? A shadow card. Guess what happens if it's 6 or more? You turn off your Blood Debt. So this card does a lot for your deck. It filters cards into your banish zone that are specifically good for making this card better, or cards that turn off your Blood Debt, and you get to decide. So it takes the randomness out of it. Where a lot of your other cards are banished 3 random from your yard, this banishes directly from your hand, which isn't always seen as great, but it can be because you get to select what it is. So ultimately, this card is probably just better in Levia than Command and Conquer, and it costs way less. And opens up the fact that you now are replacing that spot, and sometimes you'll see both in a list. So now if you just take Command and Conquer out using only Consuming Aftermath, you have other spots to build other cards. Now let's talk to the other half of the cards on the screen right now, right? Art of War. This is, again, universally a very, very good card. And as we talked about, this is a $50 to $60 card on average. So why is that the case? Well, it's a 1 cost, pitches for 2, has no defense value, generic instant. So it's an instant, so that's also something that's pretty impactful about this, because it is one of the few instant draw cards, which means it doesn't take an action to use, so you can use it on your turn and draw net cards to then give yourself some stuff, and it banishes a card from your hand. In the same way that Consuming Aftermath is valuable, this is valuable in your deck because it banishes a card of your choice from your hand, so you can get rid of one with 6 attack that you're not going to use this turn that has no pitch value, that then turns off your Blood Debt, and then you draw 2 cards from it. That's so good. And then on top of that, you get to choose another part of this card that can say, hey, attack actions and gain +1 attack and 1 defense this turn. Great, so if you're defending really badly, you can do that on your opponent's turn. Also, the next attack action that you play this turn gains Go again. That's so huge as well. Until end of turn, you may defend with attack action cards from your arsenal. So if you've arsenaled up multiple attack action cards, but you need to be on the defense now, guess what? Art of War then turns them online. This card is so good and such an amazing modal card that I'm surprised that it's not more expensive than Command and Conquer is. But the thing is it's really pricey still. It's $50. Now, no, the card that I have is a replacement for it because you really like it in terms of Levia. While the other 3 conditions are great, the very last mode is the most important one in Levia. You get to banish a card of your choice and draw 2 cards. Drawing cards is super important. As I showed you before, we only had really 1 card that shows us what we draw. So what's a good replacement card? Well, here's one that saves you about half the cost. So for about $25 to $30, opposed to $50 to $60, you can get a Tome of Findall. Tome of Findall pitches for 2. Okay, costs 1. Okay, it's not a generic instant. That sucks. It's an action. But it does have a defense of 2. So okay, already there's some give and take here. What does it do, though? Well, it draws you 2 cards. Hey, that's the same as the last mode there, except without the banish. So what makes this card anywhere near as valuable as Art of War? Well, the second part of it says, if this was Arsenal, played from Arsenal, gain 1 life for each card in hand. Guess what? You draw 2, and then you get to do this. So there are times that, for instance, if you happen to have a Spring Tunic and you're using it, good for you, Mr. Moneybags. I'm happy that you have a good freaking piece of equipment that is probably one of the best chess pieces for Levia, or for most decks in general. But if you do happen to have it, that then says, hey, you're going to have 6 cards in your hand. If you have 6 cards in your hand, guess what? That gives you the ability to defend better against your opponent and still be able to attack on your turn. And it's going to heal you for 6. Healing for 5, healing for 6 are huge amounts of healing. That's going to then destroy maybe an entire turn of tempo your opponent just had on you. Or you can just ignore your opponent completely. You can ignore your opponent's last turn completely. Now note, it doesn't have Go Again, and that's problematic. You know, where one's a generic instant and this action doesn't have Go Again, that can be bad. So it's pretty much a card that you want to use on an off turn where you're trying to build up to having a good turn, or you think, my opponent's building up to a really good attack next turn. I want to build for a better defense. Hey, Tome of Findall can be a really good option in that regard. And it's cheaper, and it gives you draw, which again is one of the weak points of your deck, right? So these are just some considerations you can put into your deck to save a lot of money. And I pretty much will vote that Consuming Aftermath is just strictly better than Command and Conquer, specifically in the Levia build. Not in general. I think in general, Command and Conquer is just better, but in this specific build, I think Consuming Aftermath is better. Now, lastly, guys, we're going to be talking about 3 underplayed cards. So these are cards that are either in a list very sparingly or not in lists almost at all. And the reason that we're going to be talking about these 3 cards is that I have been looking into them. And while one of them here is it's blue, I hadn't really been looking at its blue, but I can see that its blue might actually be pretty good. But let's talk about this, all right? So first up, we have start talk with Nourishing Emptiness. Nourishing Emptiness says, while there's are no attack actions in your graveyard. So note, this can be any other action cards in your graveyard. Your defense reactions, your other actions are great for this still. Nourishing Emptiness has Dominate. Okay, so this is already a really good early game card for you because Dominate really, like we said before, really screws your opponent's ability to defend against you early on. And then, if it hits, your hero gets +1 intellect until end of turn. Oh my god, this card is amazing. On top of that, it's a 6 attack, so that's really good for the deck. It has 3 defense, which is really good for the deck. So you're netting a draw card. On top of that, you're putting a 6 attack into your yard. On top of that, it has Dominate. In almost every sense, this card is just phenomenal for your deck. And now I can hear people saying, well, what happens if you do have an attack action in your card, in your graveyard? Well, that's fine and dandy. Banish your yard. Guess what? You're going to be banishing your yard all the time. It's going to be very rare you're going to have anything in your yard. And this card can allow you to be either more aggressive or more controlling. Because guess what? This card is good throughout the entirety of the game. So I think this is a sleeper OP card for Levia. And if you want Levia to be a really good list, you need to be running Nourishing Emptiness. There's a lot of lists out there that do not run this. And I think that they're sleeping because this card is so good. I'm going to be looking to picking up some for myself here soon, and I really want them. Now, Guardian of the Shadow Realm, there's a lot more people that put this as a conditional sideboard card. This is a card that you only want in specific matchups to protect yourself, blah, 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 blah. I think that they're kind of sleeping on the fact that Levia should just always be a control deck. I think that there's very rare occasions that you want her to be the super aggressive deck because she will be out-tempoed by a couple of the other aggressive decks. They combo much better in terms of the aggression than she does. She's hitting once really large. Okay, can your opponent take it? Most of the time, they're going to have ways to defend against it. A lot of those decks, those Katsus have a lot of decent defense reactions. You have a lot of people with defense reactions. And you're running... Fate for Scenes, maybe you're running the list that runs Sync Belows, maybe you're running some Unmovables. But Guardian is just good. It's a better Unmovable, because in most cases, Unmovable is going to be, if it comes from your hand, it's going to be 6 to 7 from your hand, right? Because you're going to run yellows, you might run reds, but maybe you run a blue here or there. But this one is a red, yeah, and it costs 2, yeah, sure, that kind of sucks. But it's a card that goes to your yard. It defends you for 6, which is huge. And then return Guardian from to your hand. Activate this ability only while it is in your banished zone. It has Blood Debt, but if it gets banished, you get back to your hand for 2 actions. So you pitch for it to get it back. That's so good. If you're setting up your Spring Tunics for this card comes back for free. You just get an extra card in your hand. Woo! It's a pitch value 1, which isn't that great, but then you can put it in your arsenal and you get... Yeah, oh my god. This card can be so valuable. And I think a lot of people sleep on the fact that how valuable this is because it's a control card. It is not an aggressive early card. All it has is a 1 dimension of it, but it has a recursion aspect to it. And on top of that, it starts filling your yard again, which can be sometimes harder to do as the game gets longer. Well, this card comes back, much like the Tome. You can keep getting this card back, and you want the recursive cards to be super universal, super good in most situations. Tome's going to be good because it just gives you a card to your hand, and if you're playing it from your banish zone, You're just netting a card at that point. You're not even losing a card. The first time you play it, it's a cycle. The second time you play it, you're just netting a card. Guardian, sure, you're having to pitch something to get Guardian back, but I think that's an okay thing to take, right? Like, the only thing that would have made this card even better is if it has action and then go again after it. It doesn't have that, so that's a little unfortunate. But there is a card you can play in your deck that then says, hey, we get to get an action point anyways. Not from this card, unfortunately. It doesn't combo well with this. I had to look that up because I was curious, but it does not count. Sadly, because you're not playing it. Anyhow, lead the charge. Now you can run the blue, you can run the red, you can run the yellow. I specifically say the blues just because they give you 3 pitch value. I have, I think, yellows in my deck because I prefer yellows because it then says it only has to be 1 cost or higher, which is dope. Anyhow, lead the charge. The next time you play an action card with cost 2, this is specifically the blue, cost 2 or greater, this turn, gain an action point. So it basically gives go again to whatever cards you play next. Now note, if you play this with, for instance, your Boneyard Marauder, it's not going to activate if you're using the blue. But if you play it with a Dread Screamer, it does activate, and Dread Screamer could potentially have go again on it, and if it gets go again, and this, you're gaining 2 action points after this, which then nets you more things you can do. Attack with your weapon, activate something else. Hey, maybe you're getting Guardian of the Shadow Realm back. There's so much versatility that Lead the Charge offers, and the blue is probably the best one. Now, it also has a 2 defense value, and it costs 0 to play, which is super impactful for this deck because everything costs so much that having something cost 0 is super useful to have. So this is just an alternative card to think about other than maybe Barraging Beatdowns, which are the more aggressive cards to run, but they do add Intimidate, which does add some controlling stuff, so I still recommend Barraging Beatdowns as well. But Lead the Charge is just another card that just doesn't see any play in a lot of these decks, and this deck, if you're running on a bit of a budget, Lead the Charge might be the card to toss in there just to have something that gives you extra actions, because that's something that also Levia struggles with. Outside of drawing, go again is her next big thing that she struggles with. As you can see, most of the cards we reviewed today did not have go again on them. So if that's the case, you kind of need things that either give you go again or be able to find ways that you can just do one really big attack a turn. Going wide isn't always the best option with her. Going tall is really good, so that is what a lot of people say, but I think you could actually go wide with her as long as you construct your deck in a way that allows you to control until you want to go wide. So guys, I hope that you enjoyed this video. Hopefully maybe my philosophy on how to build Levia is a little enlightening to you. Maybe it gives you some ideas for stuff. Maybe you have some comments that you want to make towards how you think Levia should be built. I'd love to see it, guys. I hope to continue stuff about the series. Maybe I'll have a complete deck list by next week, and I can share with you the deck list that I have built for myself. But until then, guys, I hope you all have a wonderful, wonderful day. All right, see you guys.